basketball analysis with over 70 years combined experience.
The Bob Ryan and Jeff Goodman podcast is brought to you by Prizepicks and the Gametime app.
Bob Ryan, Gary Tangwa here on CLNS Media, brought to you by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prizepicks. Bob, Celtic City, at the time of this recording, we have seen 3 episodes. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but the third episode is really when you were in the middle of it, which is the 70s, correct?
Yes. I started in 69, 70 and went through until as a beat guy until 75, 76. So we covered the 2 championships at 74 and 76, the Eastern Conference Finals in 73 and 75. This was the John Havlicek led team, Cowens, Silas, the Cheney and White. Those are my guys. And I was emotionally attached to this whole group. The social circumstance was different. You went to every practice. You went, you closed the bars with them, the ones that did do that. I'm very friendly with guys like Hank Finkel and Steve Kaburski. Later on, Kevin Stakem, who I went to see Jaws with. He probably doesn't remember, but we went to see Jaws in Milwaukee on an sunny afternoon. That was my group, and it was that's the group where the Celtics acquired the fandom that they now have, because everybody should know in the 60s they were not the number 1 team in Boston despite all the championships. Right. It was a hockey town. That clear. They make that clear. I make it clear. It was a hockey town, and even in the 70s they had to fight. They're up against the big bad Bruins. And even in the very early in the first couple of years, the Bruins were selling out the proverbial 13,909 at the Garden, and that was a great figure. And the Celtics are getting 6,000-7,000. Now they finally creeped up to 10. I remember actually writing or saying this, Gary, that, oh my God, if they could ever average 10,000 a night, wouldn't that be great? And that's in the building is seated 13,909. So it was a gradual point where they acquired this young fandom, and I do think that the key figure was Cowens, and I had to address you'd be ignoring a rather large elephant in the room if you don't acknowledge that one reason that Cowens was the turning point figure in attendance was the fact that he was white, and there's no denying that, and he never made a big deal about that. And we didn't make a big deal about that in the media. I know I didn't, but you'd be stupid to think otherwise. No, this was Boston, and in the Celtic City, they make it quite clear about what was going on in Boston at the time, and they make it quite clear by with the people that they have interviewed what local residents of color thought about Boston at the time, and who were also basketball fans. So they hit all this. The Celtics were. Very much enmeshed in the whole social upheaval in Boston.
Now, you grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I don't know if you can relate at all to what was happening here in Boston, but and what the documentary does a very explicit job is covering the racism angle. And they mentioned South Boston and Roxbury, which were right next to each other. And here you had the gentleman, the scholar, the intellectual Sat Sanders going to Roxbury to mentor these young people, because Roxbury just wasn't getting that attention. It just wasn't. It was neglected. I mean, and even Donnie Wahlberg, which I didn't know, but I thought this was a great part where Donnie Wahlberg talked about how he was bussed from Dorchester to Roxbury.
It was part of the busing.
Part of the busing. And I don't know from your perch how deep you got into that, or what you could say about that time. Obviously, it was a very violent, turbulent, and I think that time still dogs Boston's reputation today.
What I used to think about is how close the building at 135 Morrissey Boulevard, Boston, Massachusetts, right, the home of the Boston Globe, was to what was going on in South Boston, a half a mile away. We were the next door neighbor of South Boston,
right,
literally, and in Dorchester, and things that were going on. some of a lot of it I was oblivious. I mean, until I read about it in the paper the next day. So, I mean, but we were you could not be unaware of the demonstrations, the foolish attacks on, if you will, on the school buses, these poor black kids coming in on the bus, the nonsense, just idiocy. But but you're aware of it, and it was hard not to. Boston was a very volatile place at that time. And so there's no question, and you had to address it. The players, had to be affected by it, of course. And to what extent, though, we will never know what was going on inside each and every guy's head. Russell, we would have known, but everybody else, no, not necessarily. But no, it was a very specific time in Boston history as well as Boston sports history.
Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less, and at least 2 players for a shot to win up 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prizepicks. And on Prizepicks, you can mix and match player projections with different sports. Combine your favorite basketball players with players with baseball, hockey, esports, and so much more. Prizepicks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Prizepicks has weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prizepicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. Like Luka, good for 25 points or more. Jason Tatum, more than 8 boards. Jaylen Brown, more than 4 assists. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks. Run your game. I think that when I watch this, I understand when Kevin Garnett says, I had certain feelings about Boston before he came here. I'm
sure people, and we know for a fact that at least in baseball and basketball, and I don't know about, and irrelevant in hockey, obviously, but that people had clauses, no trade clauses,
right,
that typically included Boston. Black athletes wanted no part of Boston. And that resonated right heavily with the Red Sox, who, and I remember, frankly, the great transition figure there that I think was the one people over somehow, that was able to somehow be the bridge player, was Mo Vaughn. I think Mo Vaughn's personality was shown through for people to make him a popular player, and with even with the white people, but I think he was a pivotal guy. I can't say the Red Sox, Celtics had in the 70s, a black player that did that, although, the basketball fans appreciated, they're great black players. Silas, of course, that's another pivotal figure in this whole thing. And I'm extremely proprietary toward Paul Silas as well. I consider myself a friend of Paul Silas. And I was actually privileged to speak at his service. So I was, I'm very big on him. But JoJo was a quiet guy. Don Chaney, who's got some. Don Chaney, I'm glad to see is involved in this. People don't remember. They should hear from Mr. Chaney.
I think Mr. Chaney makes himself explicitly clear in this. I think that for me, the visuals, there's a lot of disturbing visuals that we see in episode 3. Okay. It's you need to watch it. A lot of disturbing visuals that we see. But when Chaney speaks, I was like, wow, okay, this guy still carries this.
No, it's good. No, he was always a quiet guy but thoughtful. You knew that, and didn't seek the limelight. And those of us who knew him knew he was a person of great substance, no question. Yes. Absolutely.
Now, in 74, he was the backcourt mate with JoJo. Then
That was a starting back.
yeah. Now,
And
Charlie Scott came in 76.
75.
Yeah, who's very Charlie Scott is very entertaining, shall we say, in this.
Charlie was great. Charlie is hilarious, and he's another forthright guy. He'll tell you what's on his mind. I used to kid about Charlie. Charlie Scott thought he was an authority on everything. Okay, I mean, it was a fun. I used to say, if you ask Charlie Scott what time it is, he will give you the political history of Switzerland. and so that's the kind of guy he was. But oh no, I'm glad that he's quite prominent in this. As well, he's very prominent in this episode. Well, the story there was very simple. The trade was made in the aftermath of the 75 failure against the Bullets, and I always had thoughts about that. But anyway, Paul Westphal was a budding star, and he was traded for Charlie Scott, who was an established star. And people, as recently, I get this periodically. I get this question in email or text. I don't understand why they traded Paul Westphal, and I confirm this with people over the years. The reason they traded Paul Westphal for Charlie Scott was that Paul Westphal was now going to become. Remember, Don Chaney had jumped to the ABA.
Spirits of St. Louis.
Remember that? Yes, so there's going to be a vacancy on that starting lineup. And it was definitely going to be filled by Paul Westphal, who was now going to enter his third year with the team. And they weren't sure that JoJo would accept Paul Westphal as an equal. That JoJo was used to being the guy to get 20, 25 every night. Right. But there might be nights when Westphal would get the 25 or 30 and JoJo would get 10, 12 shots, and he wasn't going to like that. That's what they thought. And he would accept Charlie Scott as a peer, and he did. And by the way, and now we know how Westphal went on to flourish and had a phenomenal 5 or 6 years. Until he got hurt.
I know Paul was a friend of yours, and I was a fan of his too. He would not have had the career in Boston that he had in Phoenix.
No, he wouldn't have. And you're absolutely right. It turned out to be a great life changer for him. He
appreciated what happened in Boston.
But he wanted to live in there the rest of his life. Okay. He's a Californian by birth, but even after he got traded to San Diego, he retired. He lived in Scottsdale the rest of his life. Okay, so and now he coached, around, but that's where he always had kept a home, and his wife still lives there, and his widow. We were friendly. As a matter of fact, he had Mike Lupica and his then date he had at the time before he got married, and my wife and I, two couples, were dining at Shea Westphal about 3 days before he got traded. It was stunning for everybody. He wasn't ready for it, and God knows we weren't ready for it. It was stunning, and I lost a friend at that time. I thought I was at the time, and as you well know, I famously stayed at Westphal's house during the 1976 finals when we went to Phoenix.
You and Pat Riley,
because I wasn't having a good. No, yeah, well, Riles. I love the fact that Riley's in this episode 3 as an authority, which he should be, talking about things from the viewpoint of the Suns.
Right.
But what they don't is that Pat Riley in the 76 finals was the odd man out on the roster. He was the 13th man in the 12-man roster. And that when I was hanging out Shea Westphal, and after at 2 or 3 in the afternoon after practice, we're back at the pool, that among those who were hanging out were his neighbor, Alvin Adams, and Riley, who had nothing else to do. It was at large, hanging out at Westphal's pool because he wasn't even on the roster.
Right.
But anyway, I digress.
And I remember you telling me that. So when I saw Riley pop up speaking as an authority, I went, yeah, they're really pulling this one off. I mean, he was there.
People, no, of course. But I just laugh. I know this. I just laugh. I close my eyes and I see Riles at the pool,
right?
And 76 finals. That's all.
Look, we're talking a lot about Celtic City. And whenever I watch Celtic City on HBO, I see the old garden. I even see some pictures of Bob Wright in the newspaper when he had black hair and it was long. And he was a hippie with the mustache. He looked like Derek Sanderson, for God's sakes. And then you see Hondo and you see Tommy in those crazy suits. And it makes me think about the times when we would go to games at the Old Garden, drive down from Rumford, Maine, just an easy 4.5 hour ride. Boom. And if you want to go to a Celtics game, or you want to have a memory like this with your kids, go to Gametime. It's a great app. You download it. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks, where getting tickets for your favorite team to see them play live is even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff. So you just get incredible deals on great seats. I mean, you don't have to go through like 1,000 different websites or deals. You just punch in what you want and it pops up. They have the super deal, which is always the best deal of the day. And with Gametime Picks, curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Not just sporting events, but also you can get a little culture too. Toggling this feature shows the total up front, no surprise fees at checkouts. Plus, you get a panoramic view of the seat before you buy it. And they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. I want to talk, Don Chaney goes to the Spirits of St. Louis after his 74. Also went on to be a very good coach. Paul Silas, too. Now, they tell the story, Paul's trying to get more money, and Red trades him immediately, right? Because he got the Havlicek. No one makes more money than Havlicek. So, go ahead. You can talk about it. And then also, this got traded, things started to fall apart.
It was the beginning of a down period, without question. He gets traded. Red doesn't want to pay him what he wants. Silas hung out for what he wanted, and it would round up in him getting traded to Denver. And for Curtis Rowe comes, and eventually Wicks comes, and that's another story. Really. But we what they had done at UCLA, they weren't replicating in the NBA, as a duo. Anyway, that's a whole other story. We're going to get, of course, they'll get into that. That's going to be. I can't wait to see how they handle all that, in the episodes, to come. But right, it's the beginning of. And the immediate repercussion of Silas going to Denver was Dave Cowens walking away from the team. That Dave Cowens went on that famous sabbatical in the 76-77 season for a month or 2 months, and he just, quote, wasn't prepared to play. And one of the reasons was he missed Silas. He loved his rebound buddy. He loved Silas personally. That was a silent rebellion, if you will, about the deal. And so that was a repercussion. They didn't recover until who showed up in 1979. Right. They didn't recover that Silas trade. It set them way back. There's no question.
Cowens is a hell of a guy, man. I mean, I had a chance to MC events with Dave. So self-deprecating. Maybe he listens to our podcast up on Lake Sebago there in his fortress on the lake, or not fortress, but place on the lake. I've always enjoyed talking to him. He did some work with us in studio. He's just a great guy and very unique. Like you said, I don't think you met anybody like him.
No, there's nobody. I mean, right down. I mean, it's just so many things. He addresses this in 74. They clinched the game 7 in Milwaukee. It's an afternoon game, and we fly back home. And I'll get to that story of that in a minute. But we fly back home, and he's restless. He spends the night wandering around, looking at and enjoying the atmosphere of the town and all that. And he winds up sleeping on a park bench in Boston Common.
Right.
And literally woke up this morning with the hustle and bustle of the people, the commuter crowd. At 8 o'clock in the morning, he's awakened on a park bench. He slept the night in a park bench. But this is how his mind works, among other things. So I, for some reason, didn't interview him specifically after Game 7 in Milwaukee, for my game story, even though he had been instrumental But I don't know. I didn't have a one-on-one with him, I guess. So we get, or maybe I did, but I didn't ask this following question. So we get to this is the old days, Gary. No charter. We're flying commercial. And not only are we flying commercial, we're changing planes in Chicago to get back to Boston from Milwaukee. So we go to Chicago, and while we're laying over in Chicago, I go up to him and said, Dave, well, this is your 5th year. You did it. You made it. You won a championship. You finally got there. How's it feel? And he says, and I quote verbatim, "The fun for me was in the doing. This is just something from my portfolio of basketball experiences," unquote.
No doubt.
And I've waited 56 years for a comparable quote and never got one. That's one of the great quotes that any writer will ever get from an athlete about, I think, frankly. And so there it is.
Well, we were doing an event with the Celtics, and I asked Dave the question. I go, because we were talking about the 74 series, and he said, Tommy, said you were going to double team Jabbar. And I said, yes. Dave, what did you say to Tommy when he said we're going to double team Jabbar? And he goes, "It's about damn time." What have you been waiting for?
Supposedly, that there was a conversation involving Tom Heinsohn, John Killalay, his assistant coach,
right, and
Robert Joseph Cousy, among others. After Game 6, the famous Game 6, Kareem wins with the hook
shot, yeah.
And in the wee small hours of the morning at the Boston Garden, the brain trust decides we're going to do something we never do, and that's going to double team. We're going to allow give Dave some help on Kareem. We're going to let somebody else, let Curtis Perry or Cornell Warner beat us, but we don't want Kareem to beat us. And so they did. And the fact is that there was a 17-minute stretch from the middle of the second near the end of the third period in which he was scoreless in this game, during which time the Celtics got up to a 15-point lead, which they did have eroded down to something more. And that was stopped by a great baseline drive by Paul Westphal that started them back up. So anyway, but that's a fact that they did double team him. Other than that, other times that Dave at 6'8" had to contend with 7'3" Kareem. It was all by himself. I love that from Dave. That's so. That's right.
Yeah, he was like,
damn right.
It's about damn time. Bob, this is always great, and every week now we will be recapping Celtic City. Episode 4 will drop next Monday on HBO. They're doing a great job. Okay, Bob Ryan, Gary Tanguay, brought to you by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prizepicks.